Welcome, everyone. My name is David Arnold. I'm one of the senior trainers here at Workamajig. Today, we're going to talk about kind of the back-end management of Workamajig, how you can set it up for your team to make sure that they're seeing what they need to see to get their job done, but also restrict access to things. So again, they're not seeing stuff that they shouldn't be seeing. Okay, so we're going to kind of go through a little bit the system setup. So again, in that system setup area, how can we control, for example, the security settings, services and expense items, some of the transaction preferences, some of the project tracking settings. Okay, then we'll move on to more of the employees, again, who are their approvers, their rates and things like that. Any custom builds that they may need, notifications, things like that. Okay. Then the last will kind of be going to the views and reports and how we can deal with those, and also manipulation of some of the grids with either the columns or the filters that are defaulted in for them to use. Okay. Like I said, if you have any questions, you can type those into the question area, and I'll get to those as we kind of have a natural break. All right. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and flip to my employee admin. Okay, so first we're going to start out with the system setup. So menu, admin manager, system setup, and there's quite a bit that we can actually control. So number one that we usually get is security settings. Okay, and this is always, again, what is it that they have access to? Okay, we have some defaults in our system, of course, account manager, accounting. We have already preset most of the things in the system for you. Again, for you to, once you find out that you need more or less of certain things, again, you're able to manipulate these settings. But the number one is security settings. If you're brand new to the system, I would recommend that you can use our defaults. In order to make changes to it, you're welcome to do that. But I would recommend that if you need to make a copy, for example, I need somebody else that's going to be an account manager, I can simply click on account manager and click on copy. And it says, are you sure you want to copy it? And it's yes. And so you'll see this new one that says account manager copy. And then from there, I can go ahead and change the name of it. For example, I don't have a super AE in there. Don't worry about some of these other settings. But then again, this becomes their security rights. And then once I get into that, then I can go ahead and change settings as I need to, either adding or removing things. So as you can see, there are a ton of settings in here. And that's why we usually recommend that you go ahead and use the standards to begin with, and then decide once you kind of learn the system a little bit more, what do I need to remove or add for them? Okay. And this is usually broken down into actually the areas that they kind of deal with. So again, system admin is basically saying I can come into admin area and basically manipulate some of these other fields. And I'll show that over here, the system admin here that we'll be covering a little bit more. But then as I go down, it's like project administration. Well, should they be able to open projects that have been closed? Are they dealing with the setup? You see how we can, there's a lot of settings just within the project management side of it to do that. Okay. Like I said, our defaults that are in there are, in there for a reason. Then you can always just say add or subtract, and then we'll add them to that security group. And then they would have those new rights just by logging out and logging back in. Okay. Some of the other things that are controlled by the security group are access to reports. Okay, so when I create, and I'll show that again, but when I get to a report or a view, I can set it up that certain security groups can see it. But when I'm creating custom reports, if you allow me, there's also this control here. We're saying, what is it that they can create reports based upon? Okay, and we'll talk about this in a webinar in future about setting up custom reports and things like this, but this is where it's coming from, saying what is it that they have access to. Okay, the other thing we can set up as well on this default is to say, okay, when they log in, what is the first page they see? Now, typically with an account manager, it's a good bet I'm going to want them to show up maybe, okay, either in the sales area, but a lot of times it's going to be by the project manager and either the projects page or the today page, right? So again, they're dealing with the projects. I want them when they first log in to go there. But again, it's kind of up to you to decide what is it the first thing that they should log into. Probably for the billing team, right? The accounts receivable or accounts payable, I'm going to have them end up on either the billing today page or something like that. Okay. The other thing we are able to control off of the security right is actually access to the file. So within a project file structure, okay, we can say, what is it that they can do within a project? Okay. So typically, again, account managers, we kind of want them to have full access, but we may remove some things. For example, they can add a folder or delete a folder. The most common I see is they can't delete. They can add, but they can't delete. They can rename it again and add, but they can't delete, right? And obviously they need to view it, otherwise they wouldn't be able to see it. And then modify security means that they can change these settings. And then for the file rights, typically what I see is, again, they can add for sure, depending on their security group, right? They may be able to update, which means that when I upload it, it can change that particular file. Can they delete it or not, or can they rename it? Okay. And so again, based upon that particular security group, if I'm within that security group, that will allow me to do it. If this is a brand new security group, it already accepts whatever the original settings were. And if you change that, then we can simply say reset this, and this is going to be pushed across all projects. Okay. Right. All right. Now, some of the other things. So again, that's security group, a little nitty gritty in there. Sorry about that. Okay. What are some of the other things that we have? So again, transaction preferences. So again, moving from security groups, we're going to have transaction preferences. These are defaults that are going to happen when you first start up, right? So when I have contact management, again, if we use folders or something like that, not too much in this one really. It's more like the projects that we get most common. When I create a new project, what is its number? How does it create its number? We have some of the scheduling options. Again, these are the ones that we control. So again, this is a global setting saying this is the way you guys will work. Okay. And so there are quite a few settings within here that control either the schedule, the use of to-dos when it comes to deliverables and things like that. Also, we have the ability to do project change requests and things like that. Okay. The other, and then again, each section kind of has its own thing. Again, timesheets, again, is it a weekly timesheet, daily timesheets type of thing? Do we require certain things? Are there minimums and things like that? Okay. The other thing that's within the transaction preferences that's most common would be my daily emails and my notifications. So the daily emails are those triggers for kind of the triggers for notifications, shall I say. So do I want to let people know that they didn't turn in their timesheet, right? So again, once I set a date and a time into this, then it will start that process, okay? There's also some, again, overdues and things like that. Just these are more of the reminders. And so to have that triggered, we just say, put in a date and then set the time that you want that to be triggered, and it will start doing that. If these are blank, then of course it will not be sending out those notifications. Make sense? Okay. Now, along with this, again, the timing of these kind of notifications going out regarding certain aspects of the project or the system, we have notification options. And within this, we're basically saying, how do you want those sent out, right? Do you want it to go out by email? Do you want it to go out to be in the bell here, right? There's the messages right there. Or do I want it to be both? Right. So again, we kind of give you that option. If you like to keep it internal, then again, system message only. But otherwise, you can get it both email and system message if that's what you prefer. Okay. We have implemented a new thing, which is more, the the pop-up window giving you information. And that's these. So again, if there's a calendar event, I want that to pop in the browser. I can set that up. And now when I get a calendar invite or it's ready, it'll be a pop-up in my browser letting me know that these things are happening. Okay, so task assignments, there's quite a few here. And again, that's considered a system notification. And again, it will come up as a pop-up little card in your browser. Okay, so that's kind of transaction preferences. Again, these are setting kind of global settings for various aspects of the system. And usually the numbering, maybe default approvers, things along that line. So again, I have the estimate, who would be the default approver for client invoices. Again, who would be a default approver, vendor invoice, who would be a default approver. Okay, it can always be changed on the actual transaction. This is just setting that in. Okay. All right. The last thing, kind of the system, the account information area would be the connections. Okay, so connections is how does how does information go out? So again, the emails go out, that communication. If you have a problem with email that's coming out of our system that is blocked by your system, because again, if you're on our apps, it's coming off of our mail servers, and our mail servers are use workamajig.com. Obviously, your domain is different than that. So again, a domain difference will cause it to go to spam. Okay, so how do we get around that? Again, we can set up either a DKIM record, which basically says Workamajig is an authorized sender, or you can set up an SMTP connection. Okay. Now, we also have that feature, I believe most of you know, regarding communication, where I can send out an email, that person can reply, and it can come back into the system and get threaded out. That takes this right here, this incoming email. So again, this gets set up with user ID password. We log in, we basically send mail to that box. We process it, and we'll send out any replies that need to go out. Okay. We also have available, again, if you use your own file storage, of course, Workamajig comes with some file storage. We usually use that as production storage, if that makes sense. So as for the active project, you're using it. Once the project is done, one of your steps should be to clear out those files, leaving just a thumbnail or something, a PDF of that final work with information about where you're storing it, and you're peeling those off before you close it. But we do allow you to set up your own storage, and that could be either to another S3 account, Amazon S3, or you can use Box or Box right now. Right. The Mac one, again, not too many people are using that. If you have it set up, we're not going to take it away, but for the most part, Mac server has gone away. So again, not much we can do about that one. But again, if you still had that, but for the most part, it's Box and Amazon S3. If you're on your own server, of course, you already know that you can have it on your own server, right? So it's just a way of pointing it to that. Okay. For some of you that need a little bit more, we have the single sign-on. For that, single sign-on is basically, again, you're using your certificate or your Active Directory to confirm that people should be able to get into Workamajig. Okay. The API, now we are a database. So if you have experts on working with APIs, pretty much most of the fields are available for you to pull or push information into the system, or pull information out of the system to combine. And again, that's just using the API. Okay. And then last, for banking, this is more for if you're setting up certain payment plans, right? So I pay using Payflow Pro, or I'm using sending out invoices, okay, and through authorize.net, and they pay through authorize.net, and that kind of tracks through here. If you have credit cards, we can usually, not always, but most banks are available for you to make a PLAG connection to. And that's basically, we log into your bank, pull down the credit card transactions into Workamajig for further processing. Okay. All right. So again, this is kind of that real top level stuff. What is it that people can see and gain access to? Okay. The next thing we'll look at is more from the accounting side. Of course, from the accounting, obviously we're an accounting system, so we obviously have our GL accounts. You can set this up in any way, shape, or form you like. other than we do have certain account types that we must have. Again, bank is bank. I know it's an asset account, really, but we call it bank because that's what we'll use for payments and receipts. Okay. We have the account type credit card. That's usually a liability account. But again, we label it credit card because it has certain aspects on it that will help us to track credit cards. Anyway, we're trying to make it easier for you guys. For those who want to implement credit cards, we would recommend that you actually set up a kind of a summary account called credit cards, right? And then you're placing each of the cards that you'll be downloading and tracking transactions for would have their own GL account for them, 1301, 02, 03, something like that. But again, marked towards credit cards. And this way, the people who are charging, making the charge can actually process their own transactions. Okay. Right. So again, these little things that in the back end that you set up, letting your team kind of do their thing, and that it's going to be going to the right location. Okay. The other thing we would come out of here is our items. Okay. And these are usually important. There's a couple of things so like billing, this will have our services, let you know. And I think you do know, but on each service, there's going to be a sales account. So again, if anybody puts time towards art and creative design and they put that onto a client invoice, right, that it's going to book to the 4,300 account. Okay. So this is the idea of having, again, your items, your services can be tracked to specific accounts that you like to track towards. Again, or they can all be the same, of course, but again, sometimes you track media into different locations as far as media time. Now for expenses, again, we do that same type of thing. We have both. Let me go ahead and put these. Okay. And sales account and expense account. Sorry. Okay. Okay. And so the idea, of course, when we come to purchase items is again for the expense side, when I have a vendor invoice, it's going to book towards a particular expense account that I like to track. And then the sales account is again when I put it onto a client invoice. Again, you're setting this up in the background that all I have to do as an employee, as a staff member, is I just pick the item. I did travel. I did it. This was a TV spot. This was a cable spot. And that it's going to book to a specific account. Okay. I know this is probably a lot of stuff that you guys have already gone over. But again, just wanted to show you how we can manipulate those things. Okay. All right. So any questions on system setup? Okay. Maybe one more I had was global lists. Not seeing any questions. And this is where we would typically be looking at, for example, ways of tracking. So again, I have stuff that is important to me and I need to report out on it as admins or as management. And again, typical one for project level would be either using project types. Okay. So again, what type of work do we do? Let's track that. And so then I can see, how many direct mail projects did I do as an agency? How many direct mail projects did I do for company A versus company B? Okay. So all that would be again via project type. Okay. There's some other things that can come in through this for views, for example, using project colors and things like that. That again, when I look at it in calendar views or in a couple of reports, I can get those colors. There's some numbering techniques to it as well. Okay. The other thing I might use is for billing, right? So when should I put this project into billing? Again, that could be either all the time, once a month we go through our billing cycle, but maybe we have a project billing status. And so this is again to let the billing team know, hey, time to grab these. This is ready for estimate billing or progress billing. Again, so you can identify projects that these are the ones we want to pull into the billing process, leave the others alone type of idea. Make sense? Okay. The other thing that we have is the teams. Again, this is a pretty common one where I have a group of people that I want every time I do a particular job for a client, I want to make sure these 5 or 6 people are automatically assigned to this. And that's how we work through teams. Okay. So again, I assign, here's all the people that I have on the Frank team. Here's the people that I have on the Hello team. Of course, I can belong to different teams. That's not the point. The more is just say, when I create a project, I can pick the team and I know that these 4 people or these 5 people will automatically be added to that team. And the nice thing is we can also assign this to a client as well. So when I create a project for that particular client, then this team will be pulled in as well. Okay. So for example, there was the De Beers team. We had 5 people on it. When we've created a project for De Beers, those 5 people are added in, and I could add more people or remove some that were automatically added. Okay. Right. Right. So that's system setup. Again, things to help you, again, present things to the rest of your team, okay? The next setting that's kind of more of this deep back end one would be the employees, okay? So I'm just going to go to a particular employee and grab him, okay? What are the settings on the employee that can kind of make things default in as well, okay? So obviously, the employee details are the details. The concept of supervisor is, again, just a way of saying this person kind of is in charge of these teams. And usually we could say, this is my supervisor. So again, for reporting purposes, so my supervisor is whoever I pick, and it's usually out of the list of people who have supervisor check, excuse me, I can pick from them to make them my supervisor. That makes sense. Okay. So then again, in reporting, show me all the time entries for, James Byer is the supervisor or John Arbuckle is the supervisor. Makes sense. We can also use department as well, but again, that's a good way for reporting, splitting out. Usually time entries is the most common one for that. Okay. On the employee record is, of course, the security control, right? What security group do they belong to, right? So again, that's how I'm controlling access to them for the rest of the system. These other ones, I would suggest not using the usage level, right? These types of things, not something we kind of do. There's some other settings that we would probably ignore. But for the most part, again, we want to make sure they're in the correct security group. This is what will control their access in the rest of the system. Okay. Under accounting, we want to make sure that we have time approver, expense report approver, and credit card approver if you're using those. Again, they can be their own approver. That means when they submit it, it's automatically approved. But for usually time, that might be the case, but usually expense and credit cards are usually going to somebody else. Okay. Backup approver, as we state below, that should only be filled out when I'm out of the office, right? It's basically saying, when I'm gone, when James is gone, right? When I'm gone, who should take over my duties of approving things? And that's what that backup approver is. Usually this is actually done from my own name. I click on my name, right? And I say, I click on here and I say, oh, I'm going to be out of the office. I'm going to turn this over to, D copywriter will now be in charge of taking care of my approvals. And then once I return, I go ahead and blank that back out and save it. Now they're all back into my bell. Okay. So that's the idea of backup approver. Some of the other things, if you're doing expense reports, just make sure you get the vendor set up for that. So again, it's the idea of this is when I reimburse them, again, it's going to this particular vendor that I'm reimbursing, okay? There's also some time controls. Do they need to turn in a timesheet? And how many hours do they need to actually say that they put in? We can control those types of things. Now, the most common one we have in here as well is this area right here is when I'm added to a project team and I have certain aspects of that team, right? So I'm not sure about the auto assigned to project. That means if any project is created in the system, then James Byer would be added to it. And this is this may not be necessary anymore. There's security rights that say I can access projects that I'm not assigned to. So that may be what your management actually uses as opposed to this. Okay. But the one in the subscribe to, this would be important and under deliverables. So subscribe to is basically when I'm added to the project team, make sure anytime there's a project conversation, I'm added to the conversation. If there's a to-do, again, I'm added to it. When there's a project file upload, again, I'm notified of that upload. So this is by default. A lot of times account managers have all three of these settings set up, but otherwise, like the copywriter or something like that, probably wouldn't have anything selected. Does that make sense? So again, depending on the group or the security or, again, what are they doing for you? That's where we'd set these. Now for deliverables, we have that same idea. When I send out a file for approval, should I be added as a reviewer or not? Right? Automatically. Again, I can always change it when it's on the fly, but again, automatically, if I'm on that project team, I'm automatically added as a reviewer or I'm notified of updates. So again, I'm put in as a notify into the notify step anytime there's a deliverable created. Okay. Now, as I go a little bit further, this is a good one, the services. So what can I charge my time to? So a lot of times under the security group, I do not have charge time to any service, right? That's usually unchecked. Okay. Sorry, admins, you always get every service. But as a typical creative, I can control what is it that they can put their time towards. So I can set up a default. 9 times out of 10, James Meyer is always going to put time towards senior media direction. But there are times where he may put in some, ad hoc time, and I want them to be able to pick graphic design. Again, he already has senior management director or web programming because he also does these things. But anything else, and I see here's my list of potential services, he is unable to select any of these unless assigned on that particular project. If I was assigned videography, or if James was assigned videography, he could put time towards videography on that particular project. But if he went to another project or another task, he could only pick these 3. Make sense? Okay. Now, so those are the most common. Again, how do I control what they can access and what they can put time towards? Again, this is a really good way to control this. This is in addition to that security group, right, about charge time to any service. Make sure that is unchecked, and then that's putting it to here. I have seen some people where they leave these all blank. They do put in a default, but they leave this blank. So again, I can't put time unless I've been assigned to the work. So again, depending on your guys' agency, how you like to kind of control that. Again, there's the 2 sides. Okay. I do have a question that says, I have an employee who always gets added to conversations, but his settings do not include any checks on subscribe to. Is there anything I'm missing? Okay. So once this is set up, so it may be, again, if you're copying from a template, I don't know how you're doing that, but if I go to a project, and maybe I have one here. Okay. So here we go. Okay. It doesn't matter if it's this type of project. If I go to the team, so the team, if I'm on this team, right, and it's on your template or I'm copying that over, then the setting is also done. So again, what came from my employee record, that's when it was first created. But right here under subscriptions, my bet is that one of these boxes are checked on that particular project, and that's why he's being added. Okay. So again, it's defaulted in from my employee record, and here's the project. I can always change it. Oh, it came in with to-do check. I uncheck it just for this project type of idea. Or again, it came in all blank, but for this particular project, I go ahead and check it. Okay. All right. Now, there are some other things that we have in here for notifications. Again, notifications are pretty straightforward. It's like, what do I want to be notified of? Now, as far as like the timesheet, you didn't turn in your timesheet, you didn't account for your hours. That's not these. Most of these notifications are more for management, I would say. Okay. Other than maybe task reminders. But again, the idea is that I say I need task reminders. And it's like, I just want to see my assigned tasks. Right. And then, or I have some other settings for there. And in what range do I want that daily reminder? Okay. So but most of these are usually for management, overdue timesheets. I really don't have to say anything for that because I can get that if I say timesheet is required. But this one is saying, hey, I need it for all people or people that I approve or people that I supervise. As you can see, that's more of a management level notification. Again, that's what most of these are for. Okay. All right. All right. Just make sure we kind of did that. There's my transaction preferences. The rates. I didn't really talk about the rates. Again, under the project and time, sorry, the accounting. This is where we can track along with the approver, the billable rate. This billable rate we tend not to use. Again, you're usually using services or there's a rate set on the project, a flat rate. This is only if you say get the rate from the staff or employee. Okay. Very, very rare setting on projects for that. Okay. The next is hourly cost. So again, this hourly cost is what we're using for the labor net. Whether this is loaded or not loaded, again, is it just the base rate? Is the base plus some PTO and things like that, plus benefits, what benefits are in there. It's really up to you. We really are using this as the project and client P&L, but in reality, it's, the corporate P&L is not going to use this number at all. That's going to be your payroll. Okay. But for the project and client P&L, we'll use this. So if I put in an hour, how much did that hour cost the agency? I've seen people put in just a flat rate, they put in like $25 and that's across everybody. They don't care. They just want kind of a ballpark, knowing that some people are at 50, some people are at 35, some people are 15. Well, that's probably pretty low now. Know what I mean? But again, it's kind of up to you. Just be consistent, right? If you're consistent in what you do, and how you set up people, then it's there. It's a security right to see hourly, labor net. So it's usually hidden from most people. But if you do turn them, give them access to, for example, the client P&L, then they could potentially see that labor net. Okay. Or if you give them, there's a time detail data set that looks at time entries, and there's one that says labor net. Well, if you give them access to that report, then of course they're going to be able to see it. Okay. And we'll show that a little bit in just a second. Okay. All right. Now I did get, okay. Is there a notification that goes to employees automatically if they have overdue timesheets? Okay. And that is actually yes, again, on there. That was in that system setup area. So let's do here. And we go to, the transaction preferences and notification ops, daily emails. And that's these here. Okay. So I don't have to be notified if I put in the missing time, and I believe it's the unsubmitted timesheet, right? These two are kind of automatic. If I trigger it, then it's going to go out. But this is also the trigger of that notification. Do I have to set up the employee with the notification? No. Okay. That's more for management. For the employee side for this, under the employee, all I have to do is make sure that under project and timesheet is required. Now it's looking at timesheets. Okay. The next thing it's looking at is there something greater than 0 in the days? If it's 0, we consider that a non-working day, right? So you're not requiring time in that. So again, no notification would go for those days. But you can just put in, like, for example, 1 hour, and that's enough to say, I need a timesheet on Monday. Make sense? Okay. This is how we would get the flex time people, right? They're only in, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So I just put 1 hour here, and their timesheets would be created for Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We would get no Tuesday or Friday timesheets for them. Okay. There's also the require minimum hours per day. So this is basically saying, unless you fill in this amount, you can't even turn in your timesheet. See that if I see this checked, most of the time I'm going to see this set to, for example, 6. I wouldn't have 8 set there because, well, now they really have to track every single minute, I don't often see that. Usually it's 6. So I'm not tracking meetings and things like that. Okay. But again, depends on your organization, but that's what that setting is doing. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, this kind of leads us into when a person logs in, okay, what is it that they see? So remember on the employee, on the security group, we actually set what is it that they can, when they log in, where does it take them? And the most common one that we set that to is the Today Creative. I'm just going to go ahead and take that off. It's usually the Today Creative. Now, again, each group kind of has their own Today page, and that's usually where we would have them stop. And it's what can I do within the Today page to provide them with access, right? So under the More, we'll have system settings. And this is where we can set up, depending on the security group, right? I can have a company default, but I can also go through individual security groups and define different things. So the most common is this up here, right? It's saying what is it that they're going to see, right? Does that make sense? So I'm going to filter it. I want to make sure it says completed predecessors only type of thing. I only want open to dos. Again, depending on what you guys are doing, what's the date range of this? So how is it displaying? Again, these are all these defaults that are coming in. The other is we have different views for this. We have kind of click out if you guys didn't know. The card view, this is the grid view, and then we kind of have the tile view, I believe. And this one goes along with an assignment management process. So oftentimes, again, if you're just kind of straight up using it, they will usually use the card view or they'll use the grid view and they'll hide these whatever they're not using. So again, come into system settings, and this is where you'd say, I want, sorry, the tile view. So I don't want the card. I only want the tile. Again, I'm deselecting these, or I only want the grid, that type of thing. So I take away these, and then then I only have, and I get the red reset, which means blow out everybody's stuff. And this is going to be the new default. And then they can work from there. If I just do the green, anybody who's made a change on theirs, it would not affect theirs. Okay, what does a change mean? They logged in, they went to Today Creative, and they said, I want my filters to be this. Those guys would not be affected, but anybody who hasn't really come in, it would change theirs. So I usually recommend hitting the red save, and that way, basically, it takes it all away. And as you can see, it's restricted down to just this card view. Okay. Now, when I did the grid view, sorry, let me go ahead and add the grid view back in. System settings and show the grid. Again, red and save. Okay. With the grid view, I actually have columns in here as well. Okay. So those are things that I can control, right? I like to see the grid. This is the way my team likes to work. But it's like, well, what columns do I want them to see? So this is very common through any grid that we have. Okay. So if I go to system setup, there's usually going to be this edit columns. Okay. When I click on this, these are all the possibilities I have. And so the idea is that I can go ahead and, check those off. And that's what I want then. This is what I want it to show within the grid. And then in the display order, this is where I can decide, again, where does it go? Top is the left, obviously bottom is the right. And so again, I can start to drag things up and around to say, this is the order I want things in. As soon as I say done and save, again, red save, and I come back through and go to the grid view, and I'm going to have those new things in that order. And then when I start to open it up, I'll start to see those in the grid themselves. Make sense? Okay. So again, By security group, I can say, well, in this group, they want this in the grid. And in this other security group, they like to see this stuff in the grid. So again, maybe the time entry is not a good one to use, but again, just that's the base that we're going to do. And I'll go to a different one here in a second. Okay. So first, you're controlling what is it today page they can come to. Of course, once you set those defaults, they're able to come into the display options and make the decisions of what is it they want to see. Other than they can't change the grid. They can change how it, what their filters are. That's what they're able to change. But again, you've said this is the stuff you should look at or be able to see. And so they cannot change that, just how it's grouped or sorted or things like that. Okay. Now, each security group gets this, right? So my PMs, they're going to have their own today page. And again, there may be things within the today page that you don't want them to see. So again, I'm coming into system settings, and either I'm going to create a custom one for that particular group, or again, my company defaults for this page are, and again, look at all the stuff that you can possibly check off or select or deselect. And again, that's the idea, is that, if they don't handle, as a project manager, they're not dealing with any of these open items, not uncommon, but I can go ahead and remove those from their view. Okay. I just want them to deal with, the trafficking and the scheduling and things like that. I'll leave those, but any of this, open orders or unapproved purchase orders, right? Again, I can remove those from their view because that's not something they handle. Okay. All right. Now, as far as the grid, so we have several views, and probably the project one is the most common, okay, for a grid. So here's a grid, and as I said, we have the system settings, and this is where I can set what is the grid and what is the order. Just like I showed you before, right? I'm checking it off and then deciding where from left to right, where does it show up? And then that would appear. And again, usually when I save and then do a red reset, then all of them are set to that. Okay. Now, for some of them, we've added this idea of a column set. You'll see this in the projects and in the schedule. The idea is that in this view, I have certain things I want to see, but there may be, I want to see a budget. And that's when I toggle to that, it's going to show me a specific set of columns that help me to see what is the budget, how much have I used, what is the timing, right? But if I change it to, for example, the traffic one, I don't know why I had that, it's going to tell me the number of open assignments and deliverables and things like that. So again, I'm changing it depending on what I need to see. Okay, here's my default. How I manage these is when I go to more, you're going to see edit column sets. And when I do that, it's basically saying, give it a name, okay? Then decide what are the fields that are going to be there when I insert a row and I pick what field I want it to be in. And this is a top to bottom. So again, if I, move it up and down, that's the order it will be in. And then I say, what security group has access to it? Okay. So again, my account managers may have, 3 or 4 different column sets, but my creatives, if they get access to this page, they only have the one. Right? They see it again in a certain way. I'll probably take out the budget and things like that. I'll just have maybe the status and the percent done or some other thing. Okay. Next steps or things along that line, right? So again, controlling access based upon the security group. So again, if I use the column sets, then they're going to be here. And then again, some groups may not see the traffic one. Make sense? Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. And that, again, is how we're kind of controlling that access for the employee and what is it that they see. So on each of the pages that you give access, you're telling them this is what you're able to see. The security group is saying, what do I actually have access to? If I click into a project, right, do I see all of this? That's the security right saying, can they see purchase orders? Can they see quotes? Can they see the transactions? Can they see billing, right? Can they see spec sheets? That's all controlled by the security group. But then you're also saying on top of that, again, within certain columns, what do they have access to? Okay. And remember, by default, if I'm not on the project team, I don't see the project. It's only a security right that says I would have access to multiple projects, or within the project itself, there is a setting, I think it's under counting here. This one, anyone allowed to charge time. Again, that gives them access to this project, so to speak, to put time entry towards it. They still may not have access to the project itself. Again, if I'm not on the team, I don't see it. Make sense? Okay. All right. All right. So next I want to talk about the views and reports. I'm not going to go on how to create them so much as what can I do with them. So under Everyone and Report Center, these are all of the reports that are available. Plus we have custom reports if you're allowed to create those based upon the data sets that you got in the the security group, right? I have access to these certain security data sets, okay? And we can create any number of projects based upon those. So for example, the allocated hours, I don't even know if I have anything in here. Okay, so I just go ahead and search. And again, what can I do? I basically am, grouping it and, putting in the columns that I want to see. These could even have calculated columns, which is, again, maybe a very simple one would be, for example, budget. So, right, budget, original. Let me do that. Oh, budgeted hours. Okay. And then actual. Okay. And I'm going to do a little subtraction for that to get that. This is a very simple one. Again, we can do much more complex ones. And again, remaining. Okay. Go ahead and subtotal that, save it, run it, right? And that's going to now, when I run it again, it's going to show me, again, here's the project. Again, how many hours did I put in? I put in an actual hour. I didn't have a budget. That's why it's saying -1. But again, that type of easy calculation is very doable. So again, I can see how very quickly what's available. Okay. So again, as far as doing custom reports, again, we've done a couple on there. We'll probably be doing another one in the next couple of months about how to set up custom reports. But there you go. And then we just memorize that. The other thing we can do is over on the settings, when I first create one, it's going to be private. But as you can see, we can control what security group has access to this particular report. Okay, so again, if I don't want them to be able to see it, I deselect it, then it would not be available to that security group. Something we've recently added is people. Okay, so now when I select people, basically, if their security group doesn't have access to it, then I can say, well, Bob Smith, who is in maybe one of these or is not in any of these security groups, but I'm going to give access to Bob Smith to this particular report. Make sense? Okay. Of course, if their security group is there, they're part of that security group, so they have access to it. So when I do people, this is where I'm basically saying only these people. Now, what could I do? I could technically take all of this away and say, I'm going to say people, and only these 3 people now have access to this report. Nobody else. I apply the changes and memorize, and now only those 3 people will have access to it. Okay. Now, again, as a new one, we can always copy this view. Again, I have a new one and say copy. When I make a copy or I create a new one, okay, let me make sure that one's closed up, apply changes, memorize, and modify again. When I come to the settings, you'll see that it's set to private. This is what we do with any view or report. We always set it to private until you're ready to release it. Uncheck that, and then put it towards visible to security group or to people. Okay. If you don't set that and you don't set it back to private, then unfortunately, John will no longer be able to see it either. So again, make sure it's either private checked or there's, again, security group is set up or people are set up. Okay. All right. Now, another feature of the reports is the scheduling. So I have this report, and once I search based upon my, my search criteria, I don't have any, but if I have the search criteria, I can then under here, you'll see that it says, oh, because I have to memorize this first. Okay. I'll get the link under, says more new schedule. So the idea of this, I can start to send the results of this report out to people on a given day. So for example, I say new schedule, and that is based upon the filters that are there, right? It's going to say, okay, what do you want to do? I want to email this to Bill and Bob. Okay. That's good to go. And hopefully they have email address. They don't. So this would be an issue, right? I need an email address. Don't worry about that. But then I'm kind of scheduling just like a meeting schedule, right? Basically, I want them to get a PDF or an Excel or a CSV of it. Okay. Oh, sorry. One up is send no notification, right? If there's no data, let me know that there's no data. Okay. When do I want this? Daily, weekly, monthly? If I say weekly, I want it on, Monday and Thursday or something like that. Okay. And when will it end? Again, I may end it after, a year or something like that. That's usually what I do, or end by date. Okay. But you see that it's going to send out at a certain time. So again, I'm saying send it out weekly on Monday and Thursday at 12:30. And the runtime means it's going to send it on or about. It's going to trigger at 12:30. It may not go out until about 12:35 or so, but again, it's triggered at 12:30. So there we go. So that's how I get it to trigger. So again, I often see this with time reports where I set up these schedules. So again, I'm notifying them by email that they're going, again, some sort of report for them. Okay. We are able to do the same thing in a view. And what's the difference of a view? Views tend to be our standard pattern. So under the today page or under global search and views, there's a list that are associated with, for example, today PM, project requests, projects, right? This would be a view. And we manipulate the views the same way, right? So if I modify it, I can decide what columns are in there. As you can see, I can get various calculated columns in here. Okay. I guess if I run this one, I should see some stuff. Add a new column. So here's my warning. I don't have any warning. I guess do I have any? This one would have it. Oh, there we go. Again, I busted the budget, so to speak. And then it looks like I don't have the threshold or anything like that. But again, I'm able to identify that there's things wrong. Now, again, based upon my filters, I can also, again, once I run it, I'll be able to schedule it. So here, let me memorize this. Search. And then again, based upon my schedule, I'll be able to create a new schedule. So, how do I manipulate that? I want to use this particular project, and I may go ahead and say, I just want the account manager equal to David. Okay. And I run that and I don't get anything. So that's not a good one. So I want to say John Arbuckle. Okay. So now I have a bunch of projects. So I know this report is going off of active equals yes and John Arbuckle. And so now I can go ahead and search and then schedule this. And I would probably name this one, all projects for John Arbuckle. Make sense? Schedule it out, save it, and it'll start to go out. Okay. Then I come in and same one, but this time I want, sorry, I'm not sure who I have in here. Calendar man? Nope. So I can't remember who my other people are. Maybe. There we go. Okay. So I have one for Tori Pinion. Okay. And so the same thing, once I run it, then I'm going to be able to create a new schedule for this one. And so this one, I'm going to name all projects for Tori Pinion. Okay. And again, schedule it out and it would then go out to, again, set the email to Tori. And so again, Tori would be the one that would be getting this particular report. So again, one report, and I can set it up with different filters and then create those schedules. Now, why did I name them properly? If I go into the view the schedules, then I'm going to easily identify who is it for and what is it for. Does that make sense? We do identify the filters that are on there, but sometimes that doesn't quite work, right? So again, I'm just naming it it's going to be for Tori Pinion. So again, I just identify that as the schedule name, makes it very easy to track it later. Okay. Okay. Now, so that's really the main settings. Okay. Now I didn't touch on client portal. Okay. So can we provide a client and vendor portal? Can we give access to people that are not full users? Yes. Okay. So if I go into, for example, salesperson, again, I'm just going through salesperson. Basically, every company would have a contact, right? I would think. But again, your vendors would have, your vendor is the company, right? So, if I go to who's my vendors, each of those would probably have people associated with them, and that's who I deal with. Okay. Make sense? Okay. Then from the company, from the contact itself, so here I have Bubba Smith, okay? And how do I give them access? Okay, so we have under more, I have contact settings, and this is where under security controls, I'm basically giving them a user ID and a password. Of course, I set them into a security group, and I may have a difference between my client portal and my vendor portal, okay? So this one happens to be a client, so I'm putting them in clients. Okay. Free login means they're free. As soon as I uncheck this, it's a paid seat. You're paying for them. Okay. And they're just like an employee. Okay. That's what I would do for my vendors, right? If I need them to track time and other things, I'm going to set them up as under a vendor record, and then I can uncheck free login and I'll be charged for them for whatever number of days. But without doing that, what is it that they can see? Okay. So after I'm kind of done with this bit, I come back out, and here at the more, I can say preview client portal. And that's actually client vendor portal, just to let you know. Right. And this is what they can see. Right. Typically, again, I don't have this completely stretched out that they can see absolutely everything, but maybe if I come to the settings, this is all the stuff they can see within the projects and budgets and things like that. So you can see they have quite a bit of access. Okay. Now, outside of here, they're seeing project requests, kind of some of the views they have access to. And then they have quotes. And then let me see, show completed ones. They can see projects. When they click on the project, they'll be able to see specs, estimates, files, deliverables, again, under the files. If the security right says that clients can see the files, what can they see? Can they edit? Can they, that type of thing. If you have client portals, we'd recommend that you set up in your templates, kind of that production and then client, right, folders, and grant the proper access. So when I add when I'm working in the production folder, the client can't see anything in that folder, but they can only see things that are in the client folder. So that'd be the recommendation for that. Otherwise, again, they would have access to all of it, and that may not be what you want, or no access. That's, again, up to you guys. Okay. So you can see that they have quite a bit of access. The other thing that they can do is, again, I don't have something assigned to this particular person, but they would actually be able to see their assignments, right? So you can still assign them to stuff, and they can mark themselves done. Let me see if I have one. No. Sorry. That's what I didn't think I'd get into. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing any. But again, they would be able to see the dates of it, and they can mark themselves done. That's the extent of what they can do. So as a freelancer and a vendor, right, I could come in and I can see the projects that you gave me. I can access those projects and deal with, again, upload files, pass notes back and forth, and I can mark myself done. And that, of course, goes back to the traffic people saying that I'm done with my work, right? Okay. But then, but I get nothing else, right? As you can see, there's not a lot of access. This is actually what they would see when they log in. Okay. Okay. Now, as a free login, I have a question here about reports. As a free login, no reports. Okay. They can't run reports. But if you schedule a report and send it to them, yes. So I can go back to maybe a view here just to show you. I'll go ahead and do this, schedule a report, email to, and you can see that says contacts. So technically I can send it to all of these contacts if that's what you'd like to do. Oh, did I not? Oh, it did select it. Okay. And it will email them to the results, right? Of whatever you have. But can they run a report? Do they get the access to come in here and say everyone reports or everyone view? They do not have that per se, other than those few that were on their dashboard. I think you saw that they had access to it. Sorry. Let me go to Bubba Smith here and go to the client portal. These they may have access to. So when they run projects in any of these, again, I would take it away from them other than the one that you want them to. And they would, of course, only see their projects. Don't go by this because I'm logged in as John, so it's kind of adhering to mine. But if you logged in as them, they would only see stuff for the projects for their company and that they're on the project team of. That's all they would see. So even though I'm saying all projects, they wouldn't really see these. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. And that kind of, I hope what you gain from this is, again, it's kind of an overview of a lot of areas. But I just want to let you know that, again, the idea is that you guys as management are going in and can kind of control access to what people are seeing. Most of the time, that's by security group. Okay. That's what you're controlling access by. And then from there, once they get into their screens, you can actually control what's in that screen as well. And again, what reports can they run or what views they can run. Even within global search, we can say system settings. Not everybody has that. And it says, what can you search for? Right? We can even control what they're searching for. Right. So if I did, my company default says I can't look at expense reports through here. So even if I try and search for an expense report number, it's not going to pull up any because it says don't look there. Make sense? So even that, we're able to control your people, again, what your people have access to. Okay. So I know that's a lot of layers that you think, oh my gosh, I have to set this all up. Again, for the most part, when you first started, there were security groups already set up. Okay. Most of the views were already set up. Okay. Most of the defaults were already set up. So this is only if you feel that you need to come in and, under project manager and projects, again, the fields are already set up. So again, if you think, hey, this would be helpful for us, let me go ahead and do the system settings and go ahead and edit that, or even add in some column sets for my team to use. Okay. And then again, over time, you continue to do that. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, again, I'm seeing, looks like not too many, right? Okay. All right. If no further questions, thank you guys very much for your time. Truly appreciate it. Again, if you have any questions, support@workamajig.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, or your account manager will be happy to answer any questions you have if you need to set up training or things like that to kind of implement anything that you saw today. I hope that was helpful, and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye now.